Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and it is our regular community outcomes meeting with West Yorkshire Police, with myself, the Mayor of West Yorkshire, and the Deputy Mayor, Alison Lowe. And it's great to be able to come together and to talk to the police about things that the community are very concerned about and interested in. So if we could have some introductions. We don't have nameplates, so it'd be good to see who is in the room. If we could start maybe with yourself. We've obviously got apologies from the Chief Constable, John Robbins, so if you would introduce yourself. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm Catherine Hankinson and I'm the Deputy Chief Constable for West Yorkshire Police.
Thank you.
Chief Superintendent Rush Hughes, Head of Corporate Services at West Yorkshire Police.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm ACC Pat Twiggs, Head of Specialist Crime and Criminal Justice.
Afternoon, ACC Damian Miller and Lead for Local Policing and Safeguarding.
Thank you so much. Right, let's crack on. We've got a couple of hours together so we can go into some detail on some of the questions. Firstly, before we dive into questions, there is the Mayor's and the Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime our announcements. Obviously, I've been re-elected. I'm delighted to be able to serve the people of West Yorkshire for 4 more years, working alongside my Deputy Mayor. I'd also like to note the recent sentencing of Roisin Douglas, who's been sentenced to 28 years imprisonment for the double murder of Joshua Clark and Hadir Shah, and 6 years imprisonment for wounding with intent of Brandon Coupe in Halifax in October 2023. Thank you to West Yorkshire Police for this outcome, and hopefully this will bring some reassurance to the communities, particularly of Halifax. In better news, the annual West Yorkshire Policing Awards took place last Friday, and they recognised the exceptional work of police officers, staff, volunteers and partners. And so wonderful and uplifting to see the recognition for teams and individuals who've really shown extraordinary dedication, courage and bravery, and contributed greatly to keeping the people of West Yorkshire safe. And as I often say, people like myself and Alison would run away from something terrible that was happening, and colleagues in West Yorkshire Police would run towards it to try and solve the problem. So thank you for that. Also, the recent round of the Mayor's Safer Communities Fund, that's now closed. This round was the first time applications were welcome for projects to deliver on clear, hold and build priorities in 3 Home Office pilot areas in West Yorkshire. Really looking forward to seeing all the exciting work that comes from those funded projects. Remember, this is money from the proceeds of crime taken from criminals and put back into the community for better outcomes. We've also opened applications to become a member of our new custody detention scrutiny panel. This panel is going to objectively and independently review matters of disproportionality, looking at areas such as strip searches, use of force, access to services, to name but a few, for police custody here in West Yorkshire. And it's a really unique opportunity to make a positive contribution, as the panel is going to play a really important role in supporting myself and the Deputy Mayor to hold the Chief Constable to account on both good and poor practices that impact on people detained in police custody. So that's my update. Obviously, we're being live streamed, and hopefully people will stay with us as we ask these questions and get some good feedback and intelligence from the police. So if I may move on to item 4 on the agenda. This is the custody exception paper. To be very honest with West Yorkshire Police, we were disappointed with the content of this exception paper, which was placed on the agenda to provide reassurance to myself and the Deputy Mayor following the recent HMIC inspection, because the aim of the report was to show the procedures immediately prior to and during a detainee's time in a West Yorkshire custody suite, how the risk is identified, managed and mitigated, and how detainees' diverse needs are met. So if we may dive into the first question. We know that black and mixed race people are overrepresented in the arrest figures, And this information would help us understand why, but we need more information around the choice an officer makes between arrest and voluntary or informal attendance. So please, can I have the full VA demographic data outside of this meeting? And can I ask what the demographic proportions are of suspects shown on crime to get a true picture? So we're trying to establish here if a protected characteristic signifies if you're more likely to be arrested or allowed to voluntarily attend for interview where crime is similar. So I'm hoping that you can provide us with that reassurance.
Yep, certainly, Mayor. So absolutely we'll give you the detail outside the meeting, but just to summarise the position. So from the paper, we arrest just over 51,500 people every year. Of that number, we involve about 8,300 people in voluntary attendance interviews. That's a mixture of children and adults. If we look at the disproportionality figures around the population for VAs, I know in the report we've focused on the black community in particular because that was a concern. It's 4.5% of VAs are with the black community, and if you compare that against the most recent census of 3.1, there is some disproportionality. If you delve into that a little further, the one that sort of stands out even more is within Leeds, where the VA rate goes up to 8%. Versus the local population of 5.6%. So there's increased disproportionality. We think that mirrors the picture with arrests, and one of the primary reasons we think that is the case is because of our proactive targeting of the youth violence problems in certain communities within the Leeds area, where we know we have a lot of machete and knife crime, not solely committed by and between the black community, but a lot of it is affecting young black people. So a lot of those arrests and that proactive targeting, I think, is a direct result of that particular focus at this moment in time.
Can I just jump in there?
Yeah.
Just on the 8,300
Yeah.
voluntary attendance, you say it's a mixture of adults and children.
Yes.
How many children?
I haven't got the actual figures for the breakdown with me for children for voluntary attendees, but I can get you that. So that's the proportion of the total arrest. But in terms of making a decision between voluntary attendees and arrests, so in the case of children specifically, we always try and ensure we deal with children outside of a custody environment wherever we can. And we go through a very sort of rigorous process around the necessity to bring a child into custody. And it's really the last resort when we do so. As and when we have to then bring a child into custody, whether that's for evidential reasons, to protect someone, to secure and preserve evidence, all those what we call arrest criteria, necessity for arrest, then we make sure that that young person's, if you like, journey in custody is as best it can be. So we have a lot of risk assessment, we have access to liaison and diversion in custody. We make sure, for example, that if we have to charge a young person and we need to keep them overnight for court, we don't keep them in police cells. We use what's called PACE beds. So we've been recognised nationally with a local authority for our provision in supplying a local authority placement for a child to spend the night and not stay in police cells. So it's just one of a number of measures where we're trying to mitigate and reduce the impact on a young person if they have to come into police station and be arrested.
But the question is about disproportionality, isn't it?
Yeah, so there is some disproportionality when you look at the comparisons, and as I say, these figures are including adult and children. There are some disparities, as I say, within the black community, a slight disparity within the Asian community, though not as much as about a percentage difference, and then just a few percentage difference between the white community, between the census data and the voluntary attendees figures. You asked about the suspect and offender records as well. So on our systems we have just about 191,000 people recorded for the last calendar year as either a suspect and offender on our system. So they will include people who have been arrested, but also people who have been shown as suspects, so are still to be investigated, still to be arrested. Now, interesting, when you look at the percentage breakdown of ethnicities, in that category, suspecting offenders, if again I focus on the black community, that's at 3.6%, which much more closely mirrors the census data of 3.1%. So not quite the same degree of disproportionality there in our overall cohort, if you like, of suspecting offenders.
So it would be helpful to get that data
Yeah, absolutely.
and have that on record, and we can look more closely at it.
Yeah.
In all of these questions, I'm going to refer also to my Deputy Mayor to see if there's any further follow-ups, if there's anything you'd like to raise.
So on this, voluntary attendance is not always a bad thing, of course.
No, it's not. No.
And we need to recognise that actually, for young people in particular, it's preferential. And we know that nationally, arrests of black minority ethnic people are also disproportionate to their numbers in the wider population. So I think a better number to have would be the proportion of voluntary attendees versus the proportion of arrests made by ethnicity, because if you're choosing voluntary attendance rather than arrest, actually that's a good thing. And we do need to understand if that's what's happening, or actually it's just there's disparity in both areas. That would be really helpful, I think, to understand, because that speaks then to the intention of West Yorkshire Police to not arrest and get somebody into the criminal justice system, but to have them attend voluntarily and maybe not enter the criminal justice system. Obviously, it depends on the evidence, doesn't it, where you go next.
And that's particularly true for young people, isn't it? It really is pivotal, whether that's going to have a criminal record for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so we can get that
we'll
that
get
follow-up.
that
Thank you
detailed
so
data.
much for that.
And it's also worth saying for the public that because HMIC, His Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary and Fire Rescue came, and there were 2 causes of concern and I think 15 areas for improvement. And obviously that report is public and on the website, should the public be interested in looking at that. We've got a really closely monitored action plan that West Yorkshire Police are leading on, but we've got oversight of that. And we're doing a lot of work outside of this meeting and other meetings to understand how the concerns raised by HMIC are being addressed. And we've got a working party working alongside ACC Pat Twiggs to offer what support we can. So, for example, we're going to be having the scrutiny arrangements alongside West Yorkshire Police, which hopefully will close some of the gaps that were identified by HMIC.
Can I double check? We're still recruiting to the panel, as I mentioned.
Absolutely.
So we could do with, if people are watching and they're interested, please do think about joining us, trying to make this system better. Okie doke, thank you. So if we move on to question 2. There's no data in the report, as we mentioned, about the numbers of children admitted to custody or the force's policy or ethical view of this. Can this data be shared when you share the rest of it?
Yeah.
And as I've heard from you already, your approach to children being admitted to custody is the last thing we want?
It is, Mayor, absolutely. So we've seen that there were 3,829 children arrested last year. It was a slight rise from the previous year of 4%. And again, linked to the point I made before, that's mostly within Leeds district. So again, we do think that's a direct result of some focused activity to try and address that sort of urban street gang issue. So I think there is some correlation there in terms of the activity we've chosen to take or needed to take, unfortunately.
Just for the public, at what age is a child and what age do they become an adult?
So in essence, it's up to the age of 18. So when they reach the age of 18, you become an adult. So within there will be a range, but we are mostly talking about, I'll call them young people. So young adults really is what we're talking about, but they're not still classed as adults until they're 18. So they're sort of 14 to 14, 15, 16, 17 age predominantly.
So you believe that rises because of a focus on a particular type of crime?
Absolutely, yes. And obviously our drive to reduce knife crime, particularly in young people, that's as a direct result of that proactive work.
Lovely. If you could add all of that to that report, I'd be grateful.
Of course, yeah.
Okie doke. So given the HMIC report, as we've discussed, some of the challenges around CCTV in PFI suites, how are you mitigating against that risk? For example, using body-worn video, or when the PFI footage issue, when is that going to be resolved?
So at the moment, so we have noticed it in our 2 PFI suites. I think in essence the quality of the CCTV it's okay, but it's not to the high definition standard that we've got elsewhere. And because of the way the PFI works and develops, it's slightly slower to change. We have to work with a company who oversee that. But this very week, we've got a trial ongoing at Leeds of a new high definition camera. Which we're hopeful will bring things up to standard. So at the moment, I don't have an exact date. We're just waiting the outcome of that trial, and we'll obviously work with. It's a strange term. It's called a special purpose vehicle. It's basically the company behind the PFI that are responsible for changing these things. We're working with them through our estates department to make sure that if that's successful, then we will be looking to then commission that replacement of those cameras.
Just for the public's knowledge, when do custody officers, when are they wearing body-worn cameras?
So we would normally only use those when, as a business continuity issue. So for example, if we had a failure of the CCTV system and we were then required to monitor someone, we wouldn't put body-worn video into the cells. We would just deploy them on somebody if they were having to monitor somebody. So it is carefully controlled in terms of that use, because we've got to be careful about invading people's privacy. But body-worn video is really only a short-term, if everything fails, type measure, really. And this is aimed at the sort of longer-term improvement of quality. As I say, it's not that the cameras are failing, it's just they're not as up-to-date as the standards we'd like them to be.
Because certainly in Elland Road, actually in the custody suite, looking at the CCTV, the bank of CCTV, there were cold spots.
Yeah.
And it's vital that you get that oversight, isn't
Absolutely,
it?
yes. Yeah. And we've addressed those in terms of that HMIC picked up on.
Anything from you, Alison?
No,
Thank you. Okay, moving on. In relation to the report, as we've discussed, the custody inspection, what improvements have been made to the data and governance of custody services in West Yorkshire Police? There's 3 questions here. What's West Yorkshire Police doing to improve the oversight and data capture around the use of force in custody suite? And can you reassure the public that the use of force is being monitored and that where necessary management or disciplinary action is taken when it is used in custody?
Absolutely. So
if you could just explain what force could be in custody suite for the public, please.
Yes, absolutely. So in essence, it's the similar range of measures that officers are able to use out on the street. Anything from physical application of force, so laying hands on someone, putting a formal restraint on them, use of parva spray, use of handcuffs, or use of baton. We would never ever see really use of taser in custody, but they're the main ones that you would see. And that could be from officers who have brought someone into custody who may have been violent before and then becomes violent again whilst they're escorting them into custody. It might be whilst they're actually in detention and it's the detention officers and the custody sergeant that have to reapply force because of the way they're behaving. So they're the sort of broad range of circumstances.
Lovely. And if you wouldn't mind addressing the questions, Director.
Sure. So in terms of our data governance, well, I'll talk about our governance first of all. So we've rationalised exactly what we do with our governance. So before we had a combined custody and criminal justice board, but we realised that actually it didn't do the custody issues the detail it needed. So we've now separated out those boards following sort of best practice elsewhere, and we have separate meetings focusing on criminal justice issues and custody issues, and feeding that custody board, which the district superintendents now attend in person. We have a much more focused and detailed set of data. So for example, we have and are developing a Power BI app which allows us to and will allow us to have a much more daily focus on the use of force within custody. It's not live at the moment, we're still trialling something in terms of it's retrospective at the moment, so every week it enables us to look back and see what force has been used. But we are moving towards a sort of daily app where we get the touch of a button, we can see exactly where force has been used. Now, there are some challenges around the recording of use of force, and I'll try and simplify this for members of the public. We have different systems in operation. So we have a system called Pronto, which officers on the street have on their handheld devices. That's a nationally recognised piece of software. Data is collected from that that's sent to the Home Office. So every time an officer applies force, whether it's out on the streets or in custody, they're individually responsible for justifying that use of force. So they have to record that on Pronto. When someone comes into custody, we record what force has been used on them out on the street, but we then have to record obviously any other force that we have to use on them in custody to inform the risk assessment. That's recorded on a different system. Those systems don't talk to each other, unfortunately, and this is a problem up and down the country which has been flagged to the HMIC. And for us to get those developers to talk to each other and change that's very difficult. So we're trying to develop workarounds, particularly with the use of the system out on the street that we use, to try and be really clear when officers are using that force, because at the moment they have quite a lot of choice when filling in Pronto. If I'm honest, it's too easy to make a mistake in terms of has it been used on the street, and then there's a separate use of force, and the data then gets confused. And that's one of the issues we're trying to resolve, because we end up with perhaps insufficient numbers of use of force recorded, and it's down to a system issue. And there's also some education issues for officers as well, that they have to understand every time you use force, if you used it once on the street, that needs recording. You come into custody and you use it again because of a second reason, that also needs recording. There are also some complexities with the system niche we use in custody. I won't go into detail, but you have to record it in a couple of different places. It's just how the system is. So we are using sort of robotics and AI to try and simplify that and make sure that then the system throws up a report when it says actually something hasn't been recorded properly, because as we highlight as the HMIC, quite a bit of this is around our understanding of the data and our ability to drill down to the data accurately, as much as it is a recording issue. So that's what we're working on. We've made a lot of progress, but it isn't quite where we want it to be yet, because we are sort of held back by these systems issues which are affecting lots of other forces.
May I ask a question? When will the app, you don't know yet, you don't know when that's going to go live, but
no,
if you could let us know.
We will do, yeah. It'll be in the next few weeks. It's on trial, so we can do it retrospectively, so we can look back every week, but we want to get to the point where it's lifetime.
Yeah. Alison.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about other forces that maybe have not had this highlighted as a problem in their inspections. Have you been taking learning from them, because they've got the same systems as you, or have they got a different system? How are they managing it when we're not?
It's a very similar position actually, because it's a problem with all the niche forces up and down the country, which I think there are about 30-ish, I think something like that. And no one's come up with a workaround yet. Some have or are developing similar apps to us with using Power BI. We are sort of, there's one or two forces slightly ahead, so we have been linking with them to not reinvent the wheel and borrow with pride what they've done. But at the moment, we think we can narrow down the issues with niche, but it's what we really need is an officer fills in Pronto speaks to niche, and it automatically updates it, so you don't get this cloudiness around the data. Whereas what we have at the moment and will have is you update Pronto, then you have to come and update niche. And of course, when there's an opportunity to replicate something and get it wrong, that's when you get inaccurate data.
So given this challenge, can you reassure the public that when it does go wrong, that those people go into management, or there's disciplinary action?
Yes, absolutely. So in line with this, we've increased our monthly monitoring and dip sampling of our use of force. And we do that every month in detail. We send that back to districts and ask for intrusive supervision around that. We actually now, the custody services team, look at every single use of PAVA in custody, because that's another area that the HMIC picked up on, our use of PAVA in custody, where there is some disproportionality between us and other forces, and we're currently in the process of submitting a COP paper around the future use of PAVA in custody. It is a valid tool in terms of use of force, which officers are allowed to have, but it's just whether we go one way or the other around that just to try and control that. But every single use of PAVA is scrutinised, and we have made several referrals to the Professional Standards Department recently around the potential misuse or overuse of that particular use of force.
Because if you go into a custody suite and you see how small the spaces are, in an outdoor space, it's completely different using PAVA than if you're in a small space with numbers of people in the room.
It is, and I think though the one thing that we did say to HMIC is it's a level of use of force below use of physical force and using a baton. And our concern is, if we're honest, is if we remove that and we don't do it without that evidence base, we don't want to get into a position where we have potential positional asphyxia because we're sort of restraining people physically. That's a concern with detainees in custody. So it's something we've got to think through carefully. But you're absolutely right, Mayor, that in that closed environment, it does become problematic because of the cross-contamination issue.
Although is it worth pointing out, of course, that HMIC said that the use of PAVA, in some cases that they had witnessed or they'd looked at the paperwork, should never have reached that stage in the first place. It's not about the overuse, it's about PAVA should not have been used in the cases that it was. Some of them, not all of them, obviously.
Right.
So I think it's about the recognition of the officers or the staff involved about how high the threshold is for PAVA.
Yeah, it is, and I think
managing that escalation.
And I think, in fairness, generally that's a general comment with officers now in terms of that de-escalation of conflict and use of force. It's something that we are alive to as a service, particularly as we get newer officers online. It's just something that we are monitoring in terms of how that might be changing over time.
Yeah, we don't
Do you see a difference between experienced officers and newer officers?
We have seen some differences, yes, and we're still exploring that in terms of whether that's an age issue, what that's about really.
That's one of the things that we've been looking at more generally in use of force, not just in custody, but to try and ascertain whether, perhaps an assumption might be younger officers, aren't as experienced in terms of
negotiation or
de-escalation, talking to people, and therefore resort to higher levels of force more quickly. So we need to understand that if that's the case, and then be able to adapt our training. So that is work, as Pat says, though, that's being more widely applied to use of force in general, not just in custody. But it will, of course, inform the custody position as well. Yeah,
absolutely. And we've also, as well, just to give some reassurance, we've increased our training, so we've introduced mandatory custody inspectors courses now that focus specifically on use of force and the recording and accurate recording of that. And our custody services team, who are basically a central team who sort of oversees standards within custody, have conducted in-person briefings with all custody staff now at shift handovers around issues of use of force. So we are doing what we can to educate people and impress upon them the importance of using force correctly and recording its use correctly as well.
And then following up when it's been used
absolutely,
incorrectly.
Yes. Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and just on the use of force, just to reinforce that next paper, we'll actually get a use of force paper which will separate out disparities in custody as well as within the general population. Because obviously that wasn't there before, so we weren't really clear about the use of force within the custody setting until HMIC helped us to see the light.
Yeah.
It's a team effort.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Okie doke, moving on to the next paper, Safeguarding Children. As you know, this is a regular review paper. However, the Deputy Mayor has asked West Yorkshire Police to change the focus, so each paper has a specific child or adult focus, so then we can dig down to review the issues in more detail and look at the supporting evidence around delivering our child-focused lens that I'm hoping we're going to have across my role as Chief and Crime Police and Crime Commissioner, but also in West Yorkshire Combined Authority more widely, to have that child focus. The report has been structured under the headings of the current National Child Protection Inspection regime and highlights some of their key pieces of work underway, which is all good stuff. So can we open with a bit of a discussion with a brief overview of the current trends in child safeguarding linked to offending that West Yorkshire Police are encountering? Because talking to the public out and about, child safety is a really big concern for many of the people of West Yorkshire. So if you could just give us a bit of an overview.
Yeah, certainly I'll answer the questions on this one, Mayor.
Thank you.
We currently follow the national trends in relation to child safeguarding. That shouldn't be seen as a positive, but obviously offenders operate both on the offline and online space, which obviously have no physical force borders. So therefore we're not seeing anything out of kilter. Where we get our key information from with regards to what's happening nationally is the Vulnerability Knowledge and Practice Programme, the VKPP. They do a thing called the Totality Report, which comes to us. Unfortunately, I'm not in a position where that's shared outside of policing. However, the VKPP do a shareable version of that, which is available on their online space as well on their website. So anybody can view that, so anybody listening can look at that. And we also therefore receive, on top of that, is the complex and organised child abuse database as well, which shows us where we are ranked regionally and nationally in relation to offending. So we've got an excellent working relationship with the MPCC lead, which is Ian Critchley. He was the previous deputy for Merseyside Police, who we've worked really closely with him. It's soon to hand over to Becky Riggs, who's an ACC, and we will build on that relationship as well. And we also have a really good working relationship with the VKPP as well. So not only have they been in to do a peer review of how we deliver child safeguarding, we also assist with their peer review of other forces by providing staff to go and assist with that, so we can learn from others about sharing best practice as well. So where we do book the national trend, shall we say, is in relation to neglect and abuse and the recording of neglect and abuse. Obviously, you're well aware that we're an outstanding crime data integrity force. So any referral we get where there is any mention of neglect and abuse, we will record that. So we will record a crime in relation to that. And we will work with our partners, certainly with regards to child social care, to make sure the wraparound and the support that we are giving to that child, family, etc., is the right support. So that's where we do sit out of kilter with other forces, because you're not technically comparing apples with apples because of how we record our crime. What we're also seeing is there is an alarming rise nationally in relation to child sexual abuse. When you actually delve into the detail of that, that's particularly in relation to school-age children and sharing of imagery at that age as well. Now, what we don't want to do, obviously it's an offence on the Sexual Offences Act to either possess, take or share an indecent image of a child. Where those offences occur, we will record them, again going down that crime data integrity route, but where both parties themselves are below the age of 18 and they have not been shared wider than those two, what we will do look is other means to dealing with them as well. So rather than pursuing down the criminal route, if those images have been shared further or one of the parties is above the age of 18, obviously we would look at the criminal route straight away in relation to that. But nationally, that's where it's sitting at this moment in time.
So there's two challenges there, well, many challenges there, but one is identifying what is misguided young relationships, but also actually is sharing sexual images on a phone sensible for young people.
Yeah, and that's where
Does PolEd actually
I was
tackle
about
that?
to say that's where we flip into the sort of education side, and part of that PolEd is about those relationships and appropriate relationships and what is illegal to share and that you shouldn't be sharing, to try and educate children not to do this.
Mm-hmm. And for the public, police education is a programme that most schools in West Yorkshire have taken up.
92% of schools, Matt.
Which is very good. We did give it a push, so I'm glad to see that schools are taking that opportunity where police officers or go into schools or they give content to teachers to deliver around healthy sexual relationships and so on. It's very challenging, isn't it, for young people when you could end up on the sex offenders register at 15?
It is, and that's why we don't really want to criminalise individuals when it's naivety rather than criminality. So that's why we're trying to distinguish between the two.
Thank you. Anything else?
Yeah, just on that point, can you assure us that even where children are not criminalised and don't go through that criminal justice process, the images are uploaded to the national database? Because obviously that's where the national database comes into its own, but if we don't feed the beast, then it won't work, will it?
We do feed it, because obviously that's how we can identify not only children who have been subject of offending who we've not yet identified, but we may find out at a later stage when we do our investigations.
Good, thank you.
That's helpful. Thank you so much. Okie doke, moving on. The Working Together document places the Chief Constable as the lead safeguarding partner in West Yorkshire, alongside our local authority chief executives and chief executives of the Integrated Care Board. Can you tell us how these working relationships are operating? How often you're meeting? Are the minutes published? What are the topics?
Okay, so the changes came in the latest round of Working Together, which is obviously updated for 2023, so only was published sort of towards the back end of last year. So it's the practices that we've had in place prior to this anyway. We had the district commanders that sat on the local safeguarding boards with the partners at a local basis within each of the 5 local authorities, and then they fed in to the reassurance board that I chair as ACC, and that was then fed to the Chief Constable from there. With the changes that we've put in place with regards to working together, so obviously the Chief Constable becomes the lead safeguarding partner. What we've decided to do within West Yorkshire is the level below that, which is the DSPs, we've kept that at commander level because they've got that relationship at that local level within the local authorities. So again, they will still report into the quarterly meeting that I chair, but ultimately the Chief Constable will be the LSP. What we're working through now is we're arranging a meeting with the chief executives as well as the care board chief officers as well, and that's the bit that we've still got to finalise as it stands at this moment in time, because we've been working through this to make sure that we're actually in line with the revised structure. What we also did was get Lorraine Parker in, who's the national facilitator from the College of Policing for Safeguarding Children Reform, to talk through our process, and she's been heavily involved with the changes of working together to make sure that that was fit for purpose, which she's agreed that is. So the bit we've just got to do is diary those meetings, and then obviously we can go from there. With regards to the PVP board that I chair, obviously Wicker have a seat on that as well. They attend that, and the first part of that meeting every quarter is an update from the commanders in relation to their local safeguarding partners and the progress that they're making, and that's obviously shared with Wicker at that point.
So just for the public's understanding, who's on the reassurance board?
So the reassurance board, the PVP board, I probably told you the wrong board, which is the protected vulnerable persons. Sorry, I chair 2 boards. So the protected vulnerable persons, it's chaired by myself. It's got every of the 5 commanders that attend there, our safeguarding governance department as well as people from corporate services, and also Wicker is part of that as well with regards to that oversight, so they can see what's being discussed at that level. And then what we'll bring in is if there's any particular topics where we need key people, we'll bring them into that meeting as well.
What we're trying to do as an organisation is also to have the voice of lived experience wherever possible. So I'm not sure that's something that you've been thinking about or we could develop further. Alison, do you want to pick up anything?
No, thank you.
Good stuff. Thank you very much. And obviously we don't know the current topics at the moment because you have yet to go to the next step, is that right?
Yeah, for the next step, yeah. But the key topics that are being discussed at that local level are being fed back into that PVP board now already.
Could you give us an example of what a topic would be?
Well, to be fair, the main topic of the discussion at this moment in time is in relation to working together and the restructure they've got to do it, because obviously they've moved away from independent safeguarding chairs, and the chair now will alternate between one of the 3 key members at local level, so that'll be either police, children's social care or health within that each of the 5 districts.
Okie doke, thank you. You're talking brilliant. It's brilliant. This multi-agency working. It's the only way we can solve so many of these bigger problems in society. And looking at those 12 recommendations that you're working on, which areas will have the greatest impact in safeguarding children in West Yorkshire?
So obviously the greatest ones for me are the multi-agency safeguarding hubs, the front doors as we call them, which is those co-located teams with our partners, mainly within the local authority, but health as part of that as well. So to move that forward and the priorities, what we're looking is that ongoing quality training that we provide those staff in there as well, which is certainly in relation to effective information sharing, because the key thing to provide that effective response is sharing the information between partners and making sure that we're doing that right. There's also the quality training that we've delivered to the frontline resources as well. So when I talk about the frontline resources, normally we only talk about patrol. We've delivered that to our response officers, but also to our MPTs and also our operation functions as well, because they're out and about and coming across people. And that's really been around our PPN, so our police protection notices. So when we come across a child and we want to refer that to the front door, it's about the quality of that information. So what we've really done is delivered that training through our safeguarding teams to up the level and the quality of that referral going through, because once they've received that within that multi-agency safeguarding hub, they can then use that information to provide the reassurance and put the necessary actions into place in relation to that. The other piece of work that we've done around the recommendations as well is in relation to the staffing levels as well of our multi-agency safeguarding hubs, because unfortunately, as I've said about that increasing demand with regards to child safeguarding, that's resulted in an increasing workload within there. So we've looked at that, and there's a paper that's been through the Chief Officer team which looks at increasing the staff in there so we can actually get through those referrals much quicker, so there's no delays in there. And then also that joint triage process as well, so making sure the partners are part of that initial joint triage process so we're getting it right first time.
And on that triaging, what's the initial outcomes from this new way of working?
So in relation to that then, so the triage process that we've put in place, what we do is basically what we call a brag rating, and what a brag rating is a colour rating with regards to the risk that's been identified. So basically blue, there's no identified risk, so there's nothing further that needs to go in there. Green, there's a safeguarding concern that's identified and there's further inquiries that need to be done for a further strategy meeting, so a section 47, and we will do that within 72 hours if it's done at a green level. Amber, that basically means it's significant and we will run that through that strategy meeting within that day, that 24-hour period. Or red, where they're serious, that joint triage will be done within 2 to 3 hours, so we're dealing with it there and then. But the key bit is that joint triage, it's that sharing of information and having the partners around the table, because by having the partners around the table, it doesn't have to be physically, it can be virtually. It's that information that we need, because that missing piece might not be actually contained within the police intelligence system. It might be on health or it might be on children's social care. So the key bit is being able to do that assessment, that initial brag assessment, and then depending on which way it's colour coded is how quickly we deal with that of sharing that information.
Yeah, there needs to be people all sort of a 360 around a child, don't they? It isn't just a police responsibility. No. Okie doke. What improvement to safeguarding might we expect from adopting the child protection team model being tested in other areas in the country?
So that's currently a national review which we're not part of. We haven't been privy to the specific objectives or the testing mechanisms, and basically what we're waiting for is the review to be published. So we're waiting.
When do you expect that?
They haven't given us a date at this moment in time, so I wouldn't want to suggest or hope it held to anything, but as soon as we have that, then obviously we will take that and implement it, because it'll be seen as best practice. So we are knocking at the door, we're trying to get that information, and as soon as it's released, we will look to implement that.
Okay, thank you. When I go out and about and people talk to me about sex offenders in the community, there's a lot of concern about the management of individuals. How many sexual harm prevention orders have been requested? How many agreed to in the last 12 months?
So we only become aware of them within the Visor department, which is what manages them once they're granted. And what I can say is between the 1st of April of 2023 to the 1st of April 2024, there was 299 sexual harm prevention orders which were granted during that period.
And just for the public, what does that actually mean, that prevention order?
Basically, it puts requirements in place of how they've got to behave, but also how they can be managed as well. So it stops them from doing certain things, shall we say, and if they breach that, then it gives us a power of arrest. Okay,
good, thank you. And with regard to that management, what's the current picture in West Yorkshire? How has that changed? You've given me the numbers at 299. How many of these are high risk? Are the proportions changing?
So if we then flip to registered sex offenders, so registered sex offenders within West Yorkshire at this moment in time stands at 3,474 registered sex offenders. So that's an increase of 240 since the 1st of April 2023. So I can't break that down publicly for you because I'm not allowed to share that information. But what is relevant is the number of high registered sex offenders that are being managed has actually been reduced. So it has come down, but I can't give you the particular percentage. The main reason that the number of registered sex offenders have increased is in part due to online offending, which I sort of referred to back at the beginning. More people are being convicted in relation to possession and sharing of indecent imagery. That's why there's more that come onto the sex offenders. And also, it's probably as a result as well with regards to how good we have got at identifying and investigating because of some of the things that we do in the background, which again, I don't really want to go into the sort of investigation tools
the operational
that we do,
stuff.
Yes. So, and also those that are convicted of sort of sharing or possessing those images, it's rarely that they're getting convicted now. So they are being managed as registered sex offenders within the community. So that's why, as I say, the numbers have increased over that period of time.
So would you say that the 299 sexual harm prevention orders, those individuals are the most dangerous?
No, not necessarily. The most dangerous are the ones who are high risk as a registered sex offender, which will be managed by our teams.
Thank you. Alison, anything?
No, thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Let's move on to item 6. There's so much to get through, so apologies if we're rattling through it. This is Neighbourhood Policing and Social Behaviour. Routine report update, thank you. It's providing us with an update on West Yorkshire Police neighbourhood policing activity in response to antisocial behaviour. It includes antisocial behaviour data and an overview of the work undertaken by police and partners to tackle youth-related antisocial behaviour in hotspots, related crime, drug and alcohol misuse, aggressive begging and targeted work. Okie doke. So the first question, what messaging are you sharing with partners and communities regarding officer and PCSO visibility, noting those abstractions and vacancy factors? And do you understand how this impacts trust and confidence at the local level when those people aren't being seen out and about?
Yeah, I certainly do. As you're aware, neighbourhood policing is my background and
I
love it passionately. So it's a positive message that we're actually giving now. I probably wouldn't have been sat here 12 months ago saying it as positive because of the demand crisis that we had at that moment in time, but we are in a much better position. So the message that we're giving is that we were back or on our way back to the 575 PCSOs and filling the vacancy gap. And also some of the vacancies that we're currently carrying as of police constables within neighbourhood policing is actually my own doing because I uplifted the budget by 66 and we're on the pathway to recruit those. And I've just finished the recent round of local accountability meetings with the district commanders, and we do anticipate to have those all filled by September of this year, which is really, really positive. So over the last 12 months, the numbers of abstractions actually pulling the MPT resources from doing neighbourhood policing to doing operational policing is being minimised, and that is now basically monitored as well through our reassurance board, which is the board that I chair. And at the moment, the only thing that they are being abstracted for in the main is in relation to pro-Palestinian demonstrations on weekends within cities. But again, that's about engagement, which I think is the right thing to do. and have underwritten that policy as well.
And certainly I want to thank the public as well for agreeing to the police precept, which we were able to get the commitment from the Chief Constable that extra money would go to police and community safety officers so that people will get that reassurance on the streets. Anything, Alison?
No, I was going to ask you under any other business, but it now seems a good time. I'm really pleased to see that the College of Policing are developing a new career pathway for neighbourhood policing. I just wondered what involvement we've had in West Yorkshire and whether or not we will be committing to rolling out that course. For the public, it's 4 tiers. Entry level, which I presume will be PCSOs, and then level 1 police constables and so on, and hopefully it's going to make neighbourhood policing sexy again, and the force will be fighting officers off who will be demanding to come and be part of that brilliant initiative.
It's such a skill as well, neighbourhood policing.
It is. So we're engaging with the College of Policing, and we've asked to be part of that pilot.
Oh, great.
Because we want to embed it.
Good.
Obviously
And we've been
delivered the neighbourhood training course
Yeah.
in the meantime, but for me this is the next step.
Yeah, and we've been asked for any examples of good practice that we would like to have showcased here in West Yorkshire, obviously on a national level. So if you've got any ideas about things that we could share with the College of Policing, then please do pass it on, and I'm really happy to support that.
Good.
Definitely.
Thank you. Question 2, what are the reasons for the decrease in volunteer hours for specials and police support volunteers? If I can just say, firstly, specials are extraordinary people. That I saw at the police awards, a special who was in A&E as a professional doctor and also a special at the same time. What an extraordinary person. So it is sad to see a decrease in volunteer hours. What do you think is going on?
So nationally there's been a decrease in special numbers, so we've gone nationally from about 14,000 to 5,000. I think the biggest reason for that is in relation to the police uplift programme, because we
so people could become a police officer.
So that
and
we
be
have
paid.
a lot of specials who have moved across from the volunteering into the regular ranks and now being paid for policing because they've got amazing skill sets that we've obviously wanted to take and use and put back out onto the streets. That's one of the reasons. The other reason that we saw is in relation to COVID, and we saw a massive reduction into people volunteering during that period as well. So that's impacted on us. And also, if I'm perfectly honest, I don't think the training programme that we provided for the specials really helped people who had a job because of how much time was involved. So what we've done is look to shorten that initial training programme as well. And we've had a recent drive of special constable recruitment, which will continue through that as well. So that's looking at trying to get them trained and out onto the streets, independent patrol status as quickly as possible, rather than quite what was a lengthy and long period, which if you weren't having lots of holidays and had a very understanding boss would have made it quite hard. So we've tried to modernise the package, shall we say.
And is that the same for the support volunteers?
The support volunteers don't get the same training because we'll bring them in for a particular role, but what we've seen with the support volunteers, that's probably just on the back of COVID as well, is where we saw the numbers reduced, because obviously they couldn't come into the workspace. And we just need to get back out there and back recruiting.
And what an amazing thing to volunteer to do. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and anything Tracy and I can do to support that.
Yeah, to amplify the
recruitment.
opportunity.
When the recruitments we'll pass on, if you could share that as far and
We could do a little video
Yeah.
and just say what a great thing it is if you're going to volunteer. What an amazing opportunity. Okie doke. So question 3. So the data talks about the increase in incidents finalised as harassment. They've increased by 25.6%. Is this due to changes in recording?
Yeah, so some of the increases is related to the change in crime recording, because obviously the crime recording system keeps on getting updated, and as it updates, we've got to bring that on. So from the 1st of June last year, the way we record harassment, coercive and controlling behaviour and stalking offences changed. So that's seen an impact, and also in relation to behavioural crimes as well. So if there's a continued course of conduct, we now look at that up to a 3-month window. If there's anything then reported after that 3-month window, it then needs to be recorded as a new crime on top of that. So it is in the main that, but I wouldn't want to say all 25.6% is in relation to that. I do think we've seen
It's a big
increase.
number, isn't it?
Yeah.
Over a quarter.
Yeah. But in the main, it is the change in crime recording, but I wouldn't sit here and say it's the full 25.6%.
Okay, thank you. So question 4, what's the plan to increase the number of police constables on neighbourhoods, and is there an understanding of where vacancies are sat and how it's controlled?
Yeah, so as I said, Mayor, we've just done the local accountability meeting, so they finished this week and were the back end of last week as well. So we now have a Power BI app which tells me where all the vacancies are across districts, and I can then get that down to a neighbourhood level. So as I mentioned, we upped the budget by 66 full-time equivalents. They should all be in place by September of this year. The reason I can't do it straight away, even though we're recruiting, is we've got to bring people through, train them, and at first they go on to patrol, and then be in a position to release people from patrol once I've got a full skill set on patrol, because I can't let patrol not have the right skill set, i.e. so they can go out, drive the cars, attend the calls, deal with it. So that's being managed by the district commanders to get themselves there by September of this year, but that's been seen by me within the reassurance board as well. So I know where all the vacancies are as it stands at this moment in time, and also where the 66 extra officers are going across the 5 districts, because obviously the 66 were allocated in line with AID+, which is our allocation model, and then to each of the MPTs, which we have that information, which if you want me to provide you with that, I can do, so you've got that information in hand.
Yeah, thank you. And it's a similar question about increased numbers of staff on neighbourhoods. Is this going to continue, or is it short-term projects?
The number of staff, obviously the PCs are permanent as it stands at this moment in time. The police uplift programme, we're obviously getting numbers in relation to that, so that's absolutely fine, and they are full-time postings. There is no plans to remove those at any point, you know, because we pulled that budget from the 66 was taken from a combination of the police uplift programme as well as reducing the numbers that we had in the central assessment unit for probationers coming through as new recruits. The requirements for training actually reduced ever so slightly, which meant we could take extra out. So the 66 budget is there.
Any question? No. Okie doke. I'm mindful of the time. We've already gone through an hour, and I'm not halfway through, so we will just speed up a little bit. What understanding is coming from the Solving Problems in Neighbourhoods meeting? And is there any understanding of shared themes across the county, and how's it communicated?
Yeah, so obviously what's coming out of the SPINS meetings, which was a trial that we did, or a pilot that we did in Leeds, and we've now rolled it across all 5 districts now. The key things that have come out of there are repeat demand locations, and also key individuals who are causing us issues within those areas, shall we say. What we're learning from that, and what's being shared across there, is there's certain themes in amongst those individuals and locations. That's mental health, domestic abuse, CCE, CSE. And what we are now doing is we have a what works well library, where if we've done something that's worked well, we put that information on, so another MPT, PC, PCSO can go on and say, oh, I've got a similar problem, what did you do? And share that. And we also have a neighbourhoods learning forum where best practice is shared, as well as the Chief Inspector Steering Group. And also as part of the reassurance board that I chair, each of the districts have got to report one piece of best practice back on that meeting as well, again, so we can share that information, because a lot of the issues we've got are similar, and how we deal with them we just need to pick up and roll out. Yeah,
that's reassuring. And the reassurance board sound such a good idea. This would be great information for our CSPs. Is that shared with them, I should say?
No, the reassurance board isn't, because it's an internal meeting as such, looking at what we do. As I say, yourselves do have a chair on that, but what we can then do through the district commanders that attend, if there's anything which is best practice or information that needs to be shared, they can then take that back to the CSPs, because they sit on there as a
so that's the link.
member,
Lovely. Okay, moving on to the next item, hate crime. This is the first time in recent years that hate crime has been discussed at COM. The aim of adding it to the agenda is to demonstrate your oversight and accountability, and to our oversight and accountability, and to encourage West Yorkshire Police to provide public-facing data. And you were also asked to include data and narrative around the current Israel and Gaza conflict. So the first question, we honestly really welcome this report. And aside from its production, what data and information are available and updated on your website to increase trust and confidence that all hate crime is addressed when reported?
Yeah, so quality data as well as a separate report about our equality of objectives and progress to date are both available to view on the West Yorkshire website, so I'd encourage people to take a look.
Yeah, please do, because people do feel that hate crime is rising. And my encouragement to them is always please report it, because if we don't have the data, we don't understand it as well as we should. I do note that the number on question 2, that the number of hate crimes recorded 23-24 is reduced by 10.2% from the previous 12 months, and that the recent increases in 24 are associated with the ongoing Israel-Gaza conflict. Based on the sharp increase in reporting of anti-Muslim and anti-Semitic incidents at the start of the conflict and the continued reports throughout the months, what reassurance can you give communities across West Yorkshire in respect of ongoing work, especially at district level? And what would you say to anyone who is fearful of reporting?
Yeah, so obviously with the events in the Middle East, what we decided to do was put in a dedicated detective sergeant and detective constable who have overall investigative oversight of anything which is Middle East related. They make sure that all reasonable lines of inquiry are followed, but also, is it an offence or isn't it? Because there is a line within the sand that's obviously got to cross before it becomes a criminal offence. They will look at that and then give that back to the districts to ensure that they are investigated to the right standards. So we've got that consistent approach. There's nothing being missed in relation to what's being reported. We then also, on top of that, have put a bronze community within that structure as well, and what the districts help to provide is a daily tension monitoring report as well, so we're able to see if there's anything that's been picked up in local communities that needs an extra response from a neighbourhood point of view as well, and that's captured. And what we also have then on top of that is our independent advisory groups and district scrutiny panels as well, who will also look in relation to investigations to make sure that it's received the right response and that we haven't missed anything, and also help to direct us. And what I would say to the community is obviously don't live in fear. If there's anything, report it to West Yorkshire Police. I'd thoroughly encourage them to do it. We also have hate crime reporting centres as well, so if they don't want to report it direct to West Yorkshire Police, they can go through a hate crime reporting centre as well. If we don't know about it, I can't direct an investigation or get my officers to look at it, so please report it.
And there are great organisations like Tell Mama and so on, aren't there? You could report directly to them. So can you give the public reassurance? Obviously there's an election in 2 weeks' time, which could potentially be a bit of a hotspot for hate crime, potentially. Can you give us reassurance that you're alive to that?
Yeah, we're alive to it. We have a structuring for the elections, and we have a hate crime report through that as well, and we will deal with anything that comes through that.
Thank you.
Anything from me? Yeah.
Lovely. Through the report, you refer to evidential difficulties which negatively impact the positive outcome rates. Can you say more about the issues and how they relate to the different strands?
Yeah, so ultimately, as I mentioned previously, we are a outstanding crime data integrity force, so we do record anything that comes through to us as an offence. The key part about hate crime, and one of the key strands we have an issue with, is in relation to disability hate crime. And when it talks about evidential difficulties, what it tends, when you look actually into the report and the details of what's recorded, what we find is some of those reports come from a third party, so it might be from a carer, etc. And we will record the occurrence, the crime, and then we will investigate it. But when we go then back to the victim, on some occasions they're not willing to engage with us, or sometimes they're unable to engage with us. So we then have to show it as evidential difficulties with regards to how we finalise that crime. But want to reassure the public that it has been recorded, we have looked at an investigation, and then if there is a reason that we can't, then because of evidential difficulties, we will then file it as such.
Okay, thank you. And looking at victim satisfaction, the lowest scores around outcome. So what more can you say about this regarding that victim satisfaction? And also, do we understand the lower rate across Kirklees compared to other districts?
Yeah, so looking at satisfaction up until March 2024, the satisfaction for outcomes was 53.6% for hate crimes, and that's compared to 57.4% for all other crimes, so slightly below. What we look at, and when you go down into the detail, for victim satisfaction it increases when we attend. If we attend and don't deal with it over the phone, that increases to 65.7%, but when we don't attend and deal with it over the phone, it's down at 47.6%. So there's some key things there about if we're not going to attend, we've put an aid memoir in place now with regards to how we will deal with the victim, taking those details over the phone to ensure that they understand that there is going to be an investigation, etc. So that's around our FCMU, which are the telephone investigation team. When you look at the dip in satisfaction in relation to Kirklees, so they're currently at 56.3%. However, that's just from a sample size of only 80 individuals. So the sample 80.
Oh,
so the sample, yeah. So the sample size isn't massive. So even though that's a 7.8 percentage point lower than the district average, it's what we would class as not statistically significant, if I can put my teeth in today. However, it does allow us to draw some meaningful conclusions at a force and district level, and the key conclusion in that is in relation to non-attendance and attendance, and it's making sure that when we're not attending we get the telephone investigation right.
Well, we'll keep a weather eye on that, on the Kirklees issue. Obviously what would help understanding hate crime is a police force that reflects the community it serves, which is work that we're hopefully supporting you to do. But also I do welcome the launch in November 23 of the Community Engagement Tracker to record and monitor community engagement by officers and staff who've visited multi-faith establishments, communities and other events. What have you learned from this monitoring? How are you sharing best practice across West Yorkshire Police?
So at the moment it's just a pilot. We're just running it in 2 districts, which is Leeds and Wakefield, and I have to say it's going really, really well. It was presented at the last reassurance board only a couple of weeks ago with regards to the progress of that. So once we have fully completed that pilot, there will be then a post-implementation review, and if it's worked as well as we think it is doing, we will then roll it across all 5. The key bits that it's highlighting to me is you can get down to a street level with regards to what have we actually done within that community. So whereas before it wasn't as easy to get that data, and you probably would have had to pull people in the room and said, have we been to such and such a location? Couple of clicks, it gives you all that information, and for me what it does is it shows you the bits of the communities that you're missing, so you can obviously target those individual communities, but it also shows you what's working well as well, and that can then be shared with other MPT areas, whether in that district or in the other 4 districts, to increase engagement with our communities. So certainly for me it gives us that one-stop shop of actually what we're doing in those communities.
That's very good to monitor, to be able to know where the cold spots are, because we are a beautifully diverse community here in West Yorkshire, and it's something to celebrate, and that our police understand the variations across the patch.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add that obviously Mark Rother is doing some brilliant work in Hare Hills and the recent football tournament, which unfortunately West Yorkshire Police won, which might not have please the public, exactly, because
it shows there's no favour.
Exactly, but actually that was a brilliant example of community engagement, and 500 local people got involved in that. And I know that there's going to be another football event which they want the Mayor's office to get more involved in. So I think that's right to say well done to Mark, because he's doing some fantastic work in Leeds and Hare Hills in particular.
Yeah,
But what would be nice is to be able to roll that out across West Yorkshire. It's often individuals who are very charismatic and energised, but to give other people opportunities.
Yeah, but that's where that works well for them comes in as well, and recording that information so they can just pick it up, because Mark's done all the legwork. He can just then pick it up and transfer it into another area.
Yeah, the same is true of catch as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, in Hare Hills with Ash,
if you could give me a catch in every single ward,
exactly.
I would bite your hand off.
I know. We need ashes everywhere, don't we? Okay, moving on. So the report mentions the proactive internal work in Kirklees. So can you tell me how many West Yorkshire police officers and staff have reported hate crime instances and offer information around the perpetrators?
Yeah, so the last 12 months there's been 680 reports of hate crime internally within West Yorkshire, so that's obviously our officers and staff being victimised by members of the public. That's an increase of 208 over that period of time. I can't give you any detail with regards to perpetrator data because that's not routinely captured, and what we would have to do is go into each of those areas. But what I can say is when you look at that, across the board, apart from Calderdale, all 4 districts have seen an increase. There's only Calderdale that has actually shown a decrease. And in relation to that, what we're seeing is increases in hate crime strands, which is disability, an increase of 150%, but that's only a change of 3, so it's small numbers. Faith increased by 26, race by 150, and sexual orientation by 61. That's the key changes that we've had in those areas.
So what do you think Calderdale are doing right?
Calderdale have smaller numbers that are reported, and the difference is only 14 in their change, so I don't think it's anything that they're doing right as such, because I'm not seeing a significant decrease, but the other ones are showing significant increases, so I don't think it's different. But I think the key bit about this is the messaging that we've been giving to our staff about recording.
Yeah, you don't have to put up with it if you go to work. You shouldn't have to put up with it.
Whereas in the past, I don't think we've been as strong in relation to recording these offences.
Well, maybe on long-term trends, let's take a bigger view. Okie doke, so really great positive work in schools and colleges. PolEd, as we've mentioned, is really great. But who's capturing the feedback and intel discussed and shared in the sessions?
Right, so got a brilliant PolEd team, as I say, 92% of schools, so I'll just get that in again.
I know.
So
we want 100% of all schools.
I was about to say, those schools that haven't signed up, I would encourage you to do so. It's a free resource. I don't understand why you won't be using it when it's free. We're from Yorkshire, come on. We like things for free. So the way we capture it, the PolEd team, we have Google Forms online in relation to pupil engagement and school staff engagement, so they can feed any positivity or negativity back in relation to the package that we provide. And that also asks for suggestions for improvements as well, because the team are really keen to make sure that that package is the best that it can be. We've obviously rolled it out into 2 other force areas now as well, so we've asked them to keep on feeding that information back so we can look that wider than West Yorkshire as well. We also then have a stream on our website as well, which our communications manager operates or monitors within the PolEd team as well. And again, we get quite a few suggestions from that with regards to changes. The PolEd team actually get out and about, which is brilliant, into educational establishments, and they use every opportunity to say, right, come on, feedback, what can we do better, what's new? But the other areas that we monitor and routinely monitor is in relation to the National Police Chief Council and the College of Policing as well. So if there's anything new on the horizon that's coming out that we currently don't cater for within the current package, we will go away, have a look at it, and then write that package and then get it onto the system as well to make sure it's updated and it's best as possible. And then what we've also done is obviously brought in the University of Huddersfield, who are basically assessing the full PolEd package as well to understand the benefit that it's delivering.
Thank you. Do you do, within the package, anything on suicide prevention? I was out with 3 dads walking. I don't know if you know those. The 3 dads who lost their daughters to suicide, who came together to do this massive epic walk to raise funds. And I suggested to them that PolEd might be a good opportunity to talk to young people about suicide prevention.
Yeah, no.
So if it's something that we could
Yeah,
discuss outside of this
definitely.
meeting, I'd be very pleased. I did promise it to them, so they'd be delighted as well, I'm sure.
And also, you could write to the 8% of schools not signed up again.
I will do that. That's a
If
very
you give
good
us a list.
suggestion.
I'll give you a list, don't you?
Who's missing out on the
Yeah.
PolEd fun?
Yeah.
Good stuff. Thank you so much for that. Item 8, moving on to stop and search. This will be reported annually to COM and allows me to focus on issues more broadly. And stop and search was last discussed September 23. And this gives us the data how stop and search powers have been used in a 6-month period, the 1st of July to 31st of December 2023. And included is up-to-date data on disproportionality and stop and search and compliance with remaining elements of the Home Office best use of stop and search scheme, and the impact of Operation Gemlog on stop and search, and an update regarding ongoing and future work to further progress stop and search activity. And I know that West Yorkshire Police always want to do it appropriately and proportionately in pursuit of legitimate aims to keep communities safe, but monitoring is obviously really important. So in my first question, the previous data used to refer to children as young as 5. I note the report now shows data from age 10. So do you have the numbers of children stopped and searched age 9 and under?
Yeah, so there was only one stop and search of a child under the age of 9. And that was a 8-year-old in Leeds who was stopped and searched on suspicion of being in possession of an offensive weapon. That's the only one that we have done in
aged 8?
Aged 8, yes. And that resulted in no further action, i.e. nothing was found on that individual.
Mm-hmm. And a stop and search on a child that's very young could also mean the pram, could it? That you're looking in the pram, so under blankets and so on?
Potentially, yes, but not in that occasion.
No, of course, because that child was 8. But there are times when smaller children might, but that would be just maybe their pram.
Yeah.
Can I just ask, was the body-worn video of that search reviewed? Were you satisfied that, because it's quite shocking, really.
Yeah.
8, it's quite shocking, isn't it?
I can't answer that question, but what I will do is go back and look at that, and I'll come back to you with an answer.
Yeah, because the rationale for that stop and search would have been it'd be really interesting to know. I'm sure the public would be shocked to know that 8-year-old children are being stopped and searched.
But also the gender and whether proper procedures followed, etc. Thank you. So we can see, talking about gender, far more men in general are stopped and searched in comparison to women. Do the positive outcomes rates differ pro rata?
They do. So the positive outcome rate for women is at 28.3%, and the rate for men is 33.6%. Again, that's over the period from July to December 2023. So obviously fluctuates, but...
Okay, that's good to know, thank you. And we were talking about children, so in relation to all the stop and search of children, can we have a breakdown of where they're taking place? Is it schools or colleges, educational premises and so on?
Yeah, so unfortunately there's no location categorisation in the data model that allowed a breakdown as requested. So what we've had to do is get the performance analyst to actually go back in and search the full location within the system, because nothing's ever easy, is it? So we've looked at keywords for school, academy, college, university to try and get everything. And of those, we found a total of 36 records out of 1,716. However, what I would say though, that won't take into account any searches that have been conducted in and outside of that area as such, so i.e. outside of a school, because it'd be a street, and we won't then pick up on that data. But from going into those key fields, we found 36 in total.
So for the rest, is that all in the street, or?
Yeah, it'd be outside of a school environment or an academy environment. However, as I said, what remains, some of those may have been on the street at the side of a school, but it's just the way that the fields work. What I can say though, however, if there is any child that is stopped, we have brought in the policy within West Yorkshire that we will mandatorily put in a PPN referral through to children's social care as well, because obviously it's impacted that we're stopping a child.
Yeah. So are you monitoring any positive or negative community impact in respect of stop and search and the relevant actions from the race action plan 6 months on?
Yeah, so what we do as it stands is every stop and search encounter is reviewed by first line manager, i.e. a sergeant, and that includes scrutiny of the paperwork and body worn video, and obviously if there's any development learning that will go back to the officer to learn from. Likewise, if there's anything that is misconduct, that will be referred to our professional standards department as well. And also we'll feed that into our education and training at a wider level as well. So if there's something that comes up several times, we will capture that and make sure that we're rolling that out and dealing with that. So stop and search of our black community members, that's reviewed in each district through our continuous improvement teams as well, in line with the race action plan. And that's been in place for several months, and that is also monitored by our Force Race Action Plan Tactical Delivery Group as well. And at force and local policing level, we also carry out dip sample reviews as stop and search. And when I say stop and dip sample reviews, that is a review of the body worn, and it's also a review of the paperwork as well that's submitted, as well as a review of the supervisory oversight as well, to make sure that we've got all bits of the process right. And again, if there's any feedback or learning, we will feed that back in. Complaints that are received from members of the public with regards to stop and search, that's assessed by our professional standards department, and they will determine the course of action to be taken after reviewing that as well. And we've also got our scrutiny panels as well, where we will feed in stop and searches which are picked at random. We don't just pick the best ones, they're picked at random, so the chair will pick at random, and they will provide us that lay feedback as well to make sure that they've either been conducted correctly, or if not, will provide us that feedback and then we can feed that back in. We've also then got the complaints that can come in through 101 as well, which again will be picked up. We've got the QR codes as well now, so following a stop and search, you can scan a QR code and as well and provide a survey type result. With
Can I congratulate you on the QR code? I think that's a really good development, where somebody can immediately feedback using the QR code.
And again, the whole point of that is then capturing that within local policing, and then if there's any information or anything that's picked up on routine, we can then feed that back into our training. We've obviously got all our officers attending the 2-day cultural awareness course as well, so again that was part of the recent local accountability meeting process as well, to make sure that we are concentrating on our frontline officers, both from patrol and neighbourhood policing. So the majority have either attended or are booked on courses. The number that haven't either attended or booked on courses is reducing, which I'm pleased to say. We've had over 2,000 people go through that training as well. We've got the Power BI app as well, where we can break down that information and look at any issues in relation to that. And then the next big thing is we've just rewritten the stop and search iLearn as well, and that will be mandatory for all officers to complete once a year prior to their PPST training as well.
And will there be the questions on what they're learning? It's not just something you have to watch.
No, there's questions at the end of it, it's pass or fail.
Oh right, good. Alison, anything on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about the search exposing intimate parts. Of the 9 cases where that search took place, 8 of the 9 were from black or Asian mixed ethnicity. And I just wanted to know what analysis had been done of those circumstances and whether you were satisfied that every consideration had been taken in, had been made in making those decisions around those.
Each of those should have been reviewed by a supervisory officer, but what I will do to give you that reassurance is take those away and have those reviewed by local policing independently, who will report back into me and I'll come back to you.
Because it's very high, isn't it?
Thank you. So confidence in the complaints procedure with the QR code and all of that is good to see. And good to see that at least one young complainant had the confidence to report an issue. Can you say more about the 6 out of the 7 cases that were mentioned in the report, which were finalised, showing the service provided was acceptable? So can you help me understand the basis for the complaints and the professional standards department outcome? Also, since the introduction of the trigger, how many stop and search complaints were upheld? officers dismissed, disciplinary advisory actions taken, because there's no point people complaining if then there's no outcome.
Yeah, so firstly, apologies, because I've sent through an updated paper for you, because it says 7 cases, but when I went back through all of this just to make sure everything was correct, it was actually 12 cases that have come through as complaints. I want to be transparent.
Right, thank you.
But I have provided the update in relation to that. So just running down through those 12, which have all been investigated through Professional Standards Department, or IOPC. So the first one was a male was searched for a weapon in the street outside his house. The officers then searched him for drugs. He complained of being racially profiled. Officers body worn, reviewed, and officers not found to be discriminatory. However, findings were service provided not acceptable, and 2 officers received reflective practice in relation to that stop search. The second one is a male complained that he was dragged from his car and slapped by officers being searched. The body worn was reviewed and does not show the subject being dragged from his vehicle. Officers suspected drug driving and were preventing him from swallowing an unknown item. So that was deemed by our Professional Standards Department of Service provided as acceptable. There was a parent who complained that their 15-year-old son was stopped, excessive force used, and his head hit against the wall. CCTV showed that the boy was handcuffed and he was being searched for a knife. There was no excessive force use, and the officer reported using robust commands during the search. Subject was compliant throughout, and the service provided was deemed as acceptable. There was a parent reported that excessive force was used as the son was searched. Body worn showed that the complainant searched for a knife, and the subject was handcuffed, but the grounds and rationale explained throughout, and that service provided was acceptable. There was another one where the subject complained that a illegally held knife was taken from him during a search. The knife was confiscated as an offensive weapon rather than a bladed article, and that officer was given advice reading the law because the person should have been allowed to keep it, to be fair, so that was resolved. A 17-year-old male's mother complained that he'd been strip searched at school in front of a teacher and other pupils. The body-worn video showed a search of the boy's outer clothing only due to him being involved in a disturbance, and he was ejected from the school premises and searched off-site, so that was resolved. There was a male complained that he'd been dragged from his bike at traffic lights by officers, handcuffed and searched. The body worn showed that officers discussed their grounds for the stop before it happened, based on a recent drugs intelligence, and the subject was not dragged off his bike, and officers explained their grounds throughout, and that service provided was acceptable. There was a delivery driver who was stopped by an unmarked car and a search made for drugs. The body worn shows that the officers being polite and explaining their grounds, including the presence of intelligence, and that was deemed that the service provided acceptable. The next one, the subject stated that he felt bullied at being stopped in Calais and then in West Yorkshire. The body worn video shows officers being courteous and explaining their grounds for the drug search and the subject's vehicle, which was resolved. And a male was complained that he'd been stopped twice in 2 weeks due to a weapons marker against him. He added that officers used severe force in extracting him from his vehicle before ripping his jeans. The body worn shows that no damage to the subject's clothing during the search, and he was not extracted from his car, rather he got out himself and approached the officer's vehicle, and that was resolved. And then there's 2 further ones that are subject of an IOPC ongoing investigation. So those, obviously I can't go into the details, but once they're resolved whichever way, I will then provide you an update. I think from all of that, what you can see is the body worn is absolutely fantastic in relation to either upholding or negating public complaints.
Any of these complaints come from the QR code, or was it by other means?
No, through other means. What we're really clear when we do the QR code is the QR code is not a way to complain. It's about giving us advice with regards to that stop, but we do give advice of how you do make a complaint.
Good stuff.
Yeah, I just
Alison.
wanted to ask about use of handcuffs. We
Yep.
don't want to be the Met,
Nope.
and all black people, it feels to me, that get stopped in the Met have got handcuffs on. Are you assured that we're using handcuffs proportionately and that we're using them where we have to use them rather than just because we can?
No, the answer to that question is no.
I suspected it might be.
Yeah, and I'll be perfectly honest, I've done a review personally in relation to the use of handcuffs, and there's a number of occasions where they are justified, and there's a number of occasions where they've not been justified. So the key point of that stop and search I-learn that I discussed earlier, there is a massive piece in and amongst that with regards to handcuffing, and handcuffing should not be seen as the norm. It should only be used in extreme
Because
circumstances.
it can be seen as an abuse of power.
Yeah.
There's not a common denominator in the complaints that you've just read out where they were handcuffed?
No.
There's a number of cases that were
There
young people were
were,
handcuffed.
yeah, and without going into them, I don't know, but they will have been reviewed by PSD. But it tends to be, you can understand the justification if they've got information and they believe them to be in possession of an offensive weapon. But then there's certain times that they're searching them and they're not. And for example, drugs, and you're thinking, and there's enough officers to be able to detain that individual for the subject to that stop and search. And then, you know, we've never trained officers to use handcuffs during stop and search, but it just seems
It's bad practice.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you've got drugs, that's not a weapon, is it?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okie doke. So the live trial on section 1663 road traffic stop and search has started. What early feedback can you share with us today? Maybe just tell us for the public what that new live trial is.
Yeah, so I would love to be sat here today, and I was hoping for once that I could say that it's live and we've rolled it out, because I've brought this to the Deputy Mayor a number of occasions to say we're en route and we're going to deliver. So the Home Office at first were going down the line of that everybody who stopped under a road traffic stop, you would have to submit a form. They then rolled back on that. However, what we wanted to do locally was still deliver that. So we developed a new app which would record the circumstances when we're stopping vehicles under section 163. We piloted that. However, there was an issue with the system, and the system not speaking to one another. So as it stands at this moment in time, the business readiness team are dealing with that. It's held in testing as it stands at this moment in time, and we're just waiting for the core motor team to fix an item within the system. Once that's fixed, we will be able to then test it, which I'm hoping to do this month, for the remainder of this month and the beginning of July. And then if there's no further issues with that, then be able to roll that out hopefully by July, August. It's just that there is an issue with the pilot as it stands at this moment in time, or the system, shall we say.
Is it being rolled out anywhere else, or are we just...
No, this is us. We're designing this system.
Oh, right, I see.
It's West Yorkshire, so it's our system, and it's in development with our partners Motorola, which do the handheld. So it's all handheld, and there's basically a gremlin in the system, and once we can fix the gremlin in the system, it'll work.
And can we sell it to other forces when we've got
We
it?
can
sold?
monetize
See
it.
why not?
Yeah, because we don't want to be giving it away. I know how you like to share with pride, but we want money.
Yeah, you can have Polled for free, but everything else you pay for.
Okie doke. So how does the number of S60 stop and searches compare with the rest of the country? How many show positive outcomes?
Yeah, so in relation to the number of stop and search under section 60, so there's a national table that is put out there. So when I look at that, and this is up to March 2024, so the next one will be published in September 2024, so this September. West Yorkshire shows 397 searches under section 60, so that doesn't mean we've authorised 397 section 60s, because obviously it just counts how many stop searches, and of those there was 22 arrests, so that is only a 5.5% arrest rate. The highest number force is Greater Manchester at 954 searches under section 60 with 22 arrests, which is at 2.3%. So it's not a particularly high arrest rate, but when you look at the numbers of section 60s that we've authorised this year compared to last, it's on a decreasing trend.
But it's a particularly blunt tool then, particularly in Greater Manchester. We'd be asking him some questions, won't we? But he's not here, so...
And it's not our issue, it's over to Andy Burnham. Okie doke, moving on to item 9, thank you. And we've got 25 minutes, and this is the last item for discussion. So, strategic policing requirement. This is a new item for COM with an aim to demonstrate public oversight and scrutiny. West Yorkshire Police have been asked to focus on issues they don't normally report on. So, topics such as VOG will receive light coverage with links to other papers. However, obviously, VOG is now a national threat, along with terrorism, child abuse, and real opportunities for innovation in that space. One of which is my Women's Safety Unit, which I'm really pleased we're going to be seeing. I don't know quite when that's going to be up and running, but imminently. So just for background for the public, that the strategic policing requirement was first published July 2012, updated 2015 when child sexual abuse was added as a sixth national threat. And its purpose is to set up the national threats and appropriate national policing capabilities to counter those threats. And really pleased the inclusion of VORG will allow forces to maximise the capabilities required and those opportunities presented by Operation Soteria to prevent and pursue VORG offending. Obviously, many threats can be tackled by individual police forces, but the SPR identifies those threats which really do require that coordinated, aggregated response, possibly from several forces. And police and crime commissioners, elected mayors, we've got to have regard to SPR when issuing police and crime plan for policing those challenges that go beyond our force boundaries. So each element of the SPR is relevant to West Yorkshire and focused on strategically with what the force needs to achieve rather than how they should achieve it. So question 1, regarding the 7 elements of the strategic policing requirement, which do you consider to be your greatest priority now in terms of responding to demand? Because every one of those threats is serious and important. Which is your greatest priority?
I'm going to take this one. No?
Yes, please.
Yeah, as you say, the obvious reason for these 7 being within the strategic policing requirement is because these are significant threats, all of them in their own right. I suppose what I would say at the moment is, whilst they're not individually scored, I think the ones that have been added latterly are our greatest threats at the moment. So you mentioned that child sexual abuse had been added in 2015, and then more recently, violence against women and girls. And part of the reason for that, I think, is because things like terrorism, serious and organised crime, national cyber security, we've got structures and have had structures for a long time in terms of CT policing, the ROCU and other things that actually are built and are developing that cross-force, cross-region response to some of those bigger national threats. So part of the reason why I think violence against women and girls and child sexual exploitation are our biggest threats, and not only because they are very much focused on individuals and often vulnerable individuals in society, but also because the other areas have been coordinated, I suppose, across policing for a much longer time, and we've got structures in place to deal with those. Therefore, the mitigation of those risks are higher. The risk is still there, but the way that we're able to mitigate against them, because of the structures and the capability and capacity we've got in CT policing, for example, is much greater.
For the public, ROCU is a good example of that, isn't it? Do you want to explain what they are?
Yeah, so regional organised crime units sit across there's a number of them across the country. We have one here in the Yorkshire and Humber, and they provide us with more high-level capabilities, if you like, that you might not expect across the whole of policing, because they are really quite skilled and specialist things that those teams do. But they can attack things like the cyber threat, for example. So, like I say, things like, public disorder, we've got really good national capabilities. We understand what every force needs to be able to stand up, and we do regular testing so that if we do have some public disorder, civil disorder in a particular area of the country, if we need to stand people up really quickly, we know we've got people that are trained, people who know what to do, we can push a button, hypothetical button, and that's our response. It's tried, it's tested, it's been there a long time. I think, an understanding around child sexual abuse, especially since the pandemic, and violence against women and girls, whilst we've been talking about it for a number of years, in comparison to these other threat areas, they're fairly new in thinking about what national capabilities we need. Very often these things are things that are investigated and brought to the attention of our staff on districts who, because they're omnicompetent, are often less skilled in a particular area.
Is AI a particular threat when it comes to child sexual exploitation?
Yeah, I think AI is one of those areas that is definitely more than over the horizon, isn't it? It's here, and we're hearing about it more and more. It's certainly something that teams are starting to specialise in, especially in places like regional organised crime teams, to try and understand the difference between something that's real and deep fake is very, very tricky. But also we're seeing more and more AI used in cyber attacks and, you know, ways, phishing emails that might be sent to members of the public, that kind of thing. They're just becoming much more sophisticated. So we are, and quite often this is the case, I think, in policing, catching up with what, and this is part of, you know, part B of the strategic policing requirement. It's not just, part A is the flagging of the areas that we're concerned about nationally. Part B is about, so what capabilities and capacity then is required across policing to mitigate and address some of these threats.
And I think that's
what, as new things come onto the horizon, we need to try and adapt and change, sometimes change our workforce, because police officers might not be the best people to understand.
But I think our ethics panel will be able to help us with that, won't
Absolutely.
they? Whether an image AI generated of a child is, where is the criminality? Who is the criminal when it's shared? And was the child harmed? When was the child harmed? And so on. So it is a challenge. So are there areas where the requirements of the SPR have placed additional pressures on day-to-day operations? So you mentioned Borg and CSE.
Yeah, definitely, and I think they're the two areas that I would point to in terms of, you know, what we see as West Yorkshire Police and increases in demand and safeguarding over the last, you know, decade probably. Hence the reason why in the last few years we've put a considerable amount of officers into that safeguarding arena. Sometimes at the expense of other areas, but that's the right thing to do, because we'll only ever have the, you know, a finite amount of resources, and we have to make strategic decisions about where to put those resources to protect our most vulnerable people, don't we? And so in terms of, sometimes I think from a member of the public point of view, that very visible face of policing are the people that you see driving around in cars or your local community officers, but there are a huge amount of officers who work still front line, but perhaps less visibly in that safeguarding arena, and that's all about kind of addressing that real national threat around CSEA, CSA and more generally violence against women and girls, and domestic abuse. So yeah, I think that's where we're feeling that additional pressure.
Is there anything that can be done to mitigate that pressure? Is it just more recruitment, or is it more innovative ways to deal with the problem?
Yeah, I think there are more things that we could perhaps do in terms of being more innovative. I mean, quite a lot. I mean, you know, we have an aspect of our investigations that, you know, we do that are non-recent. So, you know, that is very much about getting closure and a result for victims of crime about things that might have happened some years ago, and we're very proactive in West Yorkshire in dealing with that. There are certainly, you know, if we think about prevention being better than cure, then ultimately, you know, a lot of the campaigns and some of the campaigns that you've done about don't be that guy, that kind of, you know, trying to talk to within PolEd some of our young men predominantly about what are good relationships, healthy relationships, what's good behaviour, respectful behaviour, and then trying to deal with, you know, there are perpetrator programmes that we have for some of our domestic abuse perpetrators to try and reverse some of that behaviour, especially if it's early behaviour, lower level behaviour. But again, not perhaps so much so for the higher risk. So, you know, it then links into prisons, doesn't it? It's kind of it's so complex, but ultimately really vulnerable people at the heart of it.
And we have to keep trying and keep innovating. Looking specifically at the serious and organised crime strand, do you have any comments on the use of developing tech by criminals? We know that they're increasingly smart and using cryptocurrencies, as I mentioned, AI and the dark web. is there anything West Yorkshire communities can do to build resilience to these threats?
Yeah, I think, like you say, anything that offers new opportunities for criminals and criminal networks is a concern. Crypto is one of those because it does offer that level of anonymity and makes tracking things complex, but we do have advanced crypto investigators within our different specialist teams. So we are already building capability and capacity to understand and move with that developing threat. And, you know, we have had a number of successful prosecutions already where significant amounts of assets have been taken from people in cryptocurrency investigations. So it just certainly isn't, from a criminal point of view, somewhere that people can hide away from. We will find them. It's a bit more difficult to track in these more advanced investigations. The dark web is, you know, is similar, isn't it? It's a place where criminals often coordinate their activity, but again, we do have specific teams who are able to investigate things that happen on the dark web. We have a footprint there, and you'd expect that, wouldn't you? We've talked about AI already. I think in terms of basic advice, all the same things that people probably have heard many times before about the best thing you can do as an individual and a family is to think about those things about, you know, how password protected are your devices on many of the different, you know, websites that people use these days. Thinking about where your own data sits and how you can best protect that data. And there's lots of advice there. There's stop, think, fraud websites that people can look at that gives that basic advice. And then in terms of businesses, because businesses clearly have a really key role to play in protecting all of our data when we give them our data. Our West Yorkshire Police Cyber Protect Officer provides training for businesses across West Yorkshire.
And certainly Age Concern and organisations like that do some very good training, don't they, for vulnerable cohorts
and things like that, especially where people, you know, might be more susceptible to scams. So there's lots and lots of websites that people can go to for that basic advice.
Super, thank you. Anything, Alison?
No,
thank you. Okie doke. So item 10, well, that's just the future agenda items. We'll be going on to road safety, which I'm pleased about, given that we've got our Vision Zero and the 25 million that we allocated, and our report's going out imminently.
Yeah, it is.
Violence against women and girls, drugs and alcohol, serious violence and organised crime, use of force, and then an exemption paper that we've asked for, technology in policing. So thank you very much for your attendance, and thank you to everyone who's tuned in online. It's really important that we get feedback from you, the public, to help us understand how we can better be your voice in meetings like this. So please do engage with us and help us hold the West Yorkshire Police to account on your behalf. Thank you all for coming. And thank you, Alison, too, for attending and the hard work that you do month in, month out to help us do our job properly. Thank you so much.